Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, being intellectually sober. Randy Blythe. He's the lead singer and songwriter for the heavy metal band Lamb of God. He writes and sings, which you might call yelling or even growling, very angry, aggressive, dark music. He has a sordid past you would probably expect. Severe alcoholism, jail time for manslaughter charges in the Czech Republic. You might be surprised or not that he's the son of a Southern Baptist pastor, somebody who he admires a lot. And Randy has just written his second book. It's called Just Beyond the Light, Making Peace with the Wars Inside Our Head. So I was sent an advanced copy of the book, and I just found Randy to be an incredibly introspective, insightful, and intellectually sober individual who I resonated with a lot. Today, Randy really looks at his past and his present so differently. I mean, his music career started in punk rock and was real political, rebelling against society. And today he recognizes the one-sided judgment of all of it. He says if something is worth believing in, a political, religious, or humanitarian position, surely it should withstand rigorous examination from a rational, educated observer with critical thinking. He goes on to say, if you're unwilling to question your own beliefs and just accept them at face value, you're driven by fear. We really got into talking about fear a lot. And he shares that he finally realized that his own head was just lying to him, and the war inside his head and the incessant conflict was just his daily, constantly shifting perception of reality. Well, I feel that's the war in all of our heads, and it's where my primary interest is these days. So following is my conversation with Randy to dig into his experience and discuss our shared views on perception and reality and judgment to that matter. Again, I found Randy just really thoughtful and humble. I'm actually going to join him in Denver in a couple weeks during his national spoken word tour for his book and get to know each other even more. You can check out his book, Just Beyond the Light, anywhere. And you can find him, just search for Randy Blythe or his band, Lamb of God. When I'm not having these conversations about human potential, I'm working directly with people on their human potential. You can find me at kevinmiller.co. Here are some sponsors. They help make the show possible. Then drive with me and Randy Blythe and talk about being intellectually sober and sober in other ways. And let's see what we can learn for ourselves today. Randy, when your book came across my desk and I started flipping through it, the first thing I noticed was someone who has examined their life. And that's probably the most attractive thing in a human to me. And as I've continued to read it and to see your examining, it's a lot of your perspectives I resonate with, but I think most of all, it was, I was actually thinking about it a minute ago, and it goes well with your story that it's somebody who I felt was intellectually sober. How's that feel?
Thank you. That is, I think that's something I'm still struggling to attain, intellectual and emotional sobriety. I've obtained physical sobriety. As anyone reads the book will find out, I mentioned right from the beginning, I'm an alcoholic. I drank and did drugs at Olympic levels for about 22 years until I finally came to a point where I just didn't want to exist anymore. So I quit drinking. But I think once the physical component of addiction has left your body, if you want to remain sober, you have to examine your own life. You have to come to terms with who and what you are, your faults, your flaws, as well as your gifts and strengths. Because if you don't, the component of alcoholism, at least as far as I can understand, the physical component, it's taken care of in a week. Right? You could lock someone up in a room and you're not going to come out for a week, and they would be physically cured of their alcoholism. But people again and again go to rehabs, they get sobered up, and they come out and they go back to drinking, even though it's killing them. And I think that's because they are not willing to truly examine themselves. So for me, self-examination and examining my own life and searching for meaning with it is in very real, very practical terms, a matter of survival for me. Because if I go back to drinking, I will die eventually. I know that. I was not a light partier.
Well, I appreciate you saying that it's a daily effort, because even that, I should correct myself. I'm working more and more these days with my own language to not noun things. So sober, to be intellectually sober, to be to be emotionally sober. I mean, you said I haven't attained that. Who has?
Yeah, I
But
don't
maybe
think.
the daily sobering, that it's the effort to, because I said I resonate. So have I been a knockdown, drag out alcoholic? No, but it feels like it's just always simmering under the surface, the addiction, and not going too far to have I don't want the consequences,
No,
but the
you don't.
appetite is there.
Yeah.
But the appetite is there, which brings us to, and this is really my lead off question with you. I mean, you talk, I think it was in your intro, and it talks about how, I think this is the quote: he works daily to maintain positivity in a world that feels like it's spinning out of control. And you talk later in the book, well, throughout it, the war inside your head. And then initially you said alcohol is how you dealt with it.
Yeah.
Until ultimately you felt like the alcohol was actually magnifying it.
100%.
Okay, so now you're sober, but the war hasn't stopped.
No.
What's the go-to? I'm tempted to say that we all medicate with something. We all address it with something. I don't know if that's fair, but today you're waking up, the war's still there. You're not going to a beer. What are you going to?
I start off every day. The first thing about the way I start off my day, and it's quite intentional, is I refuse to look at my phone for the first hour that I'm awake. I refuse to look at it. Only on incredibly emergency type situations would I look at it, because once I do that, and as everybody knows, once you open the phone to see the news or the email or the social media, there's this constant outpouring, particularly with news. It's a 24/7 negative news cycle, constantly. And if you start off your day like that, you are at the cognitive mercy of someone or something else. And for me, I struggle enough with just the craziness that comes out of my own head. I don't need to have more negative input right from the beginning. So I try and start off my day very intentionally, very calmly. I wake up, I make some coffee, I go into my study, and I do a little journaling, and I read some philosophy, usually some Stoic philosophy, usually some Marcus Aurelius or some Epictetus or some Seneca. And in looking at this ancient words, like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, about 2,000 years old, I'm seeing that the problems that he faced and wrote about 2,000 years ago are precisely the same that I am facing today. It's just a different window dressing on it. So I look at his words and try and internalize them and write about them in my journal, and maybe write about my life, and try through that to try not to place so so importance on the externals within my own life, to give them such weight. Like this morning, I was reading how he took kind of the God's eye view at time. It's a pretty famous Stoic exercises where you pull out and try and look at things from above, and you see all the wars and the people being born and fighting and squabbling and loving each other, and natural disasters and plagues and all this stuff. When you look at all this from above, from a sort of cosmic view, you see that it's so ultimately minute, in the larger scheme of things. So for me, starting off the day, reading and thinking and journaling a little bit like that helps me proceed forward. And it's a process of reminding me of that stuff throughout the day, of reminding myself that the only thing I have control over is my own actions and how much energy I devote to these crazy thoughts that pop into my head.
Yeah.
I can't stop these crazy thoughts that pop into my head, but I can at least attempt to exert an effort not to feed the negativity.
Well, I'm going to give a quote from you and ask about, actually though, Randy, my laptop, the image on your laptop is a quote by Marcus Aurelius.
Yes.
It says, think of yourself as dead.
Mm-hmm.
You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly.
Yeah.
That reorients my world. And on that note, to what you just said, one of the quotes I took out of your book, you said, there's a war inside my head, an incessant conflict ignited daily by my constantly shifting perception of reality. That's really the essence of what hooked me into wanting to have you on the show, as I continue to wrestle with reality, if there really is any. And if there is, does it matter? Because what seems to matter is the meanings we attach to it. As
Yes.
you said, the perceptions that we have of it. So I'm looking at it. It may be benign, not that it's meaningless. Obviously, if it's a bad thing that happened, it's a tornado that wipes out, my house. I mean, it does matter, but more than the damage that it may or may not do is the meaning I attach to it. And that's what I read into you talking about. I'm daily dealing with the perceptions that I have of this world and your take on it. So let me ask you this. When you look at the chaos, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not even going to put the label on it, but you look at the world, do you look at it and question whether or not it really is what you think it is, or you do think it is, but you're still trying to just reconcile your place amongst it? Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair. I think both. I think I do both. I do question my perception of events and my value judgments I place on these events. This is good nor bad. And I've come to kind of try to accept the fact that, with a few exceptions, most things that happen within my life are neither good nor bad. They just are. I am not talking about big ticket, large picture, universal morality type stuff like child abuse or warfare or stuff like that, in which case I very much do believe in good and bad. However, within the very constrained sort of framework that is my existence, I think I place way too much importance on just ridiculous, silly things, So I have to ask myself, when I look at big things, is this actually something worth getting getting upset over? Or is this just an emotional reaction from me? Is this my preconceived notions of the way things should be, and now they're not, in my view, and I'm upset? It is definitely a struggle, though. For me, I try and look at things. I think about this. I'm 53 years old. I'm going to be 54 soon, and I think about things that bother me now. And then I compare them to things that bothered me when I was, say, 14 or 15 years old, right? And I think some things just felt like the end of the world at that time. And admittedly, teenagers are not known for being the most level, rational creatures, And try telling that to a teenager, of course. People tried to tell me that back then. But in retrospect, I see that a lot of the stuff that I was just totally upset over, it does not matter now. It does not matter at all. So I'm wondering, as I get older and experience life more, are a lot of the things that I get upset over now, are they really worth getting upset over? And when I'm laying on my deathbed, whenever that may come, and I'm getting ready to go on the next part of my journey, whether it just ends or I go somewhere else, I don't know. Am I going to sit there and am I going to be regretful that I didn't waste more time getting upset over a lot of things, and then not committing, at least just getting upset and then not committing to a course of action to change those things, if I have any course available? So yeah, it's interesting.
It is, and that's why you're here. I'm interested in the stories around, again, the examined life. I'm gonna ask a question on. You just mentioned yourself in younger years, 14 or so, and you actually in the book referenced, I think you said 8 years old when you hit the disillusionment of, your parents or adults being perfect, and you saw that they're fallible, and that bothered you. In your book, I mean, I still read in, I still experienced a lot of frustration, anger, if you will, at least with the culture, with a lot of things going on. So that hasn't gone away necessarily.
No.
But now let's go back to your story. And I'm going to unfairly stereotype.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right. So you go, if we look at the highlights of the story, you're in the heavy metal band, and there's lots of baggage, people attached to just that aspect.
Yes, sure.
Alcoholic. Your story of being in jail and the incident with the guy that fell off stage and whatnot, all this stuff, and think it's probably a troubled childhood. Yet you also say in there, my parents were kind of moral, loving people.
They were.
It wasn't so. It wasn't that you were locked in a basement and raised by wolves and abused and whatnot. But somewhere along the line, you started to experience some friction internally in regards to the external and how you were perceiving it, and that took a head to the point to where you were drinking yourself into oblivion. When you look back now at 53, what was the catalyst? What was the itch that started that then took over to a great degree?
You mean that took me into alcoholism?
Just the anger that
right.
alcoholism.
Well,
that was the
right. Yeah, sure. Well, I think as you mentioned, I was raised by very moral, loving parents. I did not. I was never abused. I have friends who were. It's horrific. I'm glad that was not part of my experience. But in a sense, almost, I think my parents may have been. I was not spoiled. Don't get me wrong, but I think at a young age, maybe around third grade, is when I really started seeing hypocrisy in adults, not from my parents, but from adults. And I think if my parents did me any disservice, I think it would be to not explain that not everybody was as cool as they are. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of impossible, maybe, to explain to a third grader. I was raised by these parents to believe that everybody is equal. Everybody has inherently the same worth. It doesn't matter what race, what religion, what economic background you come from. And therefore, everybody should be treated equally. And I am the son of a minister, right? My father was a Baptist minister at the time. He's no longer in the Baptist church due to their weird veer off into literal interpretation of the Bible and fundamentalism and all that stuff. He's a super smart guy, But I was raised as the son of a Baptist minister in a little tiny town with one traffic light. Um, yeah, literally one traffic light, one church, a general store. That's it. And I was the son of a minister, and the preacher's kid in a little tiny town. Everybody knows who you are, and everybody's pretty cool to you for the most part. And so I'm raised in this sort of religious environment and taught that God loves everyone and that we're all equal, and this is how you should treat people. That is what my parents taught me, and I believe that is 100% correct. Everybody is, no one's better than anyone else, for especially not because of background, of something of your, not even of your own choosing. But when I saw people in the church behaving in a hypocritical manner and judging other people for their differences or their lack of money or whatever, I was like experiencing some cognitive dissonance. I was experiencing a disconnect between what my parents, which were my world, they're every child's world, what my parents taught me and how the world was. And then my parents split up at the end of third grade, right when I had started seeing this sort of hypocrisy in this little church. And my parents split up, and they handled it awesome. They did not take children prisoners. There was no messy divorce, all that other stuff. They just weren't meant to be together. And they're good friends to this day. I got really lucky with that. But I left there, and we moved to a different state. We moved to Virginia, and all of a sudden I was the new kid. And as a preacher's kid, I did not have money, right? Because Baptist preachers from one traffic light towns, it's not the mega church, And I wore hand-me-down clothes from my cousins, and we didn't live in the right part of this little town we lived in. And I'm this new kid from North Carolina who's moved to Virginia, and people are judging me and rejecting me. And because I was not from there, I did not have the right clothes, I did not have money, and I did not understand that as a young child. I didn't understand that, once again, because I was taught that everybody is equal and no one is better than anyone else. And I tried to fit in for a little bit. I tried, in the fourth and fifth grade, I'm like, I want people to like me, but they just didn't. So that pissed me off eventually, because there was no reason for it. And to this day, it's when I see people mistreating other people or talking down to them or acting like they're better than them in public, if someone's berating their waiter or whatever, it pisses me off so bad. I'm like, who the f do you think you are? And I will say something. So that was, it was confusing for me at that young age. I didn't understand why I didn't fit in, and I just couldn't fit in. And I was too nerdy. I read too many books, Lord of the Rings, loving that. I mean, in the fourth grade, I'm reading James Clavell's Shogun. It was way beyond my reading comprehension level, but I'm reading it anyway, and not understanding some of the cultural references in the Japanese and so forth.
Randy, that's where I learned about sex.
Me too.
About the same age.
Yes.
Literally. I've never heard anybody talk about that. My grandmother, we went to Southern Baptist Church just for the alignment.
Yeah.
So at your age, I'm 54, so I'm within a year of you.
Yeah.
At your age, I'm reading Shogun, given to me by my Amish grandmother, who just knew I liked to read, and she'd pick up books at garage sales.
Sure.
I end up with Shogun, and I'm reading about graphic sex, and that's how I learned how a man lasts and all those good things.
That's amazing. There's some synchronicity happening here.
Some synchronicity. Is this? And we're talking about anger again. I mean, the war. This is what you talk about. The war inside your head, the anger. Is this where it started and grew and took root?
Yeah. It's like this disconnect in a child, but not understanding why people are judgmental. So what if I don't have the right clothes? Is that important? Like, how are you supposed to, are you placing some sort of value metric on footwear? It's ludicrous. Or the right clothes. It's so stupid. And I just didn't understand it because that's not the way I was raised. And so I began kicking back against that. Eventually I got tired of trying to fit in and people not accepting me. And I'm like, well, screw you. I don't care. And I got made fun of for reading, for being for educating myself, for reading. It's like, what are you reading? You nerd? And I'm like, this makes no sense. Reading's awesome. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I started putting up that wall in between myself and other people. And then I got involved in the punk rock music scene eventually. And it was a bunch of other people like me, people who were rejected, and they didn't care about my clothes or the fact they liked that I read books, or that I didn't fit in. And I found some community there. But by then, the anger had firmly taken root. And in that music scene also, there's a component, at least back in the day, a heavy component of political awareness, of broader awareness of social injustice. When I got into the punk rock scene, apartheid was still going. Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And that was discussed often. American foreign policy was discussed often, which, anybody who would not be disgusted by apartheid, you're a soulless cretin, So that comes into me and makes me angrier and angrier and angrier. And when I started drinking, it was not originally to deal with these feelings. It wasn't. It was just to have a good time. Just a high school kid with a bunch of other kids having some beers, but pretty soon it became a coping mechanism for me, and it worked for a while, and then it didn't. But by the time I realized it had stopped working, it was too late. It was just what I did,
Well, and there's where, and I don't want to minimize anything. My experience with myself and others, though, is who does not have some level of anger.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like it's simmering under the surface of everyone. And then who doesn't have some way that they are, I'm going to use the word medicating. I don't know if that's always fair, but they're addressing it somehow.
Yes.
I do struggle to feel like we're not the most addicted society ever at this point, and call it food or shopping or social media or whatever. But
all
it's
of
something that, you're taking yourself out with. There are consequences, and it is to deal with this anger, deal with, for me, it was a lot just my own identity and how I identified with things. We're back to perception in that. And, even the music, I was heavy metal music. I'll have to admit, I have not really been involved with that since I was a kid.
Right. Of course. Most people.
And Metallica and
yeah,
whatever, we would do that. And so I went and I wanted to look at heavy metal music in regards to anger. So I typed this in a couple of days ago, Randy, and I typed in, does heavy metal music, and I was going to type in, does it increase anger? But here's what was first interesting. Does heavy metal music, and as Google does, it right away gives you these options. Does heavy metal music, here's a list. Increase testosterone, affect the brain, cause depression. Here, you'll like this one as a surfer. The fourth one, does heavy metal music attract sharks? No lie. Yeah.
I hope not.
I'm literally what came. Okay, it keeps going. Does it help plants grow? Does it kill plants? Does it cause anxiety? Yeah, it keeps going on. That was interesting. But I did put in, does it cause anger? Does it increase anger? And I was looking at, your story and as you gravitated towards that. And I was really surprised to see it said there is, this is AI, of course, these days saying it, but it says there's insufficient evidence that heavy metal music causes anger. And some studies suggest that it can help process.
Yes. You will hear that again and again and
I
again.
did not know. I was ignorant.
Again and again from metal fans and from people who play aggressive music, whether it be heavy metal, hardcore, or punk rock. You're like, this is a way to get it out, to release that. And I certainly feel that at times when I get off stage. It's like, it's all good. And you'll hear again and again and again from people when they actually bother to meet people who at a show, they're like, I'm going to go to this show. Maybe they're not a heavy metal fan. They'll go to one. They'll be like, everyone was so nice. Everyone was so nice. And it's true, because it's a community of people who take this music and it's different. I think I'm not bagging on any particular artist, but that take this music and it's a lifestyle. It's part of your identity, and you can find community in that in a manner that, you know, whoever has the latest top 40 hit, their fans, they're going to go see him play or whatever, but they don't have a community built around this thing. And there really is one here. So I don't think that listening to heavy metal increases anger at all. I think it can help deal with it. And furthermore, I have met interesting thing. More than once, several parents of autistic children, interestingly enough, who were like, your music is the only thing that will calm my child down. He's
Really?
Yes. Even like non-communicative autistic children, they'll put on Lamb of God and they'll calm down. And I've heard that it's similar for some other guys in metal bands too. I don't know what it is, what part of the neural structure in this autistic child's brain that it affects, but it levels them out. Apparently, they love it.
What was curious, or I was curious about it, Randy, because I have been the lifelong, what did you call yourself? Kind of like your two parts of yourself. The first one was like Mr. Eternal Optimist.
Yeah, Mr. What is it? It's Mr.
I've got it written down.
I have a copy of the book.
I'll find. I know. I hate it when people ask me.
Mr. Relentless
Optimism.
Yeah. Mr. Relentless Optimism, and then there's the dark one.
That was my life. I grew up with a dad who was in personal development, and if I got out of line, I had to listen to Zig Ziglar and get an attitude adjustment and get rid of that negative thinking stuff. And it was in far too recent years with therapists saying, Kevin, you got to sit in it, man. When you feel that emotion, that negative emotion, sit in it, quit. Go. It seems great that you go for a run or, put on some happy music or whatever, sit in it. And Randy, it's really been in the past maybe 2 years in dealing with some loss and some legit grieving, really for me, for the first time in life, that I found myself wanting to listen to, call it sad music, to watch a sad movie.
Yeah.
Thinking, I'm already sad. Wouldn't I want to, my past would have run from that and go medicate the opposite way. And now I'm finding solace. I'm really finding it's feeding me in a good way. It's helping it to sit in it and actually maybe even exacerbate it. So again, this is fairly new. So when I read that about heavy metal music, it made sense. And even as you're talking about an autistic kid who talk about a war that may be going on inside their head and it helps level them out, it fascinates me.
Yeah. I think the thing with emotions, and this is something I am still learning. I'm still learning, as we talked about emotional sobriety, still trying to learn how to do this stuff. With me, because I am a pretty pragmatic dude and I was raised in this society to be a man, and if there is a problem, you find a solution and you fix it. And I need point A to point B, point C, problem, method, solution. Let's get to work. And I'm not saying it's great for me to sit around and just weep all the time or anything, because that's, you don't want to become a completely ineffective human being. But if I experience, because I've dealt with some depression issues since I was a kid, I think, when I experience this stuff now, instead of really trying to medicate it in some way, whether with an actual substance or with some activity like going shopping, I try and allow myself to feel that stuff and experience it rather than view it as 100% this bad thing, put a value judgment on it. And furthermore, another crucial component of that is I am my own harshest critic. Nobody can kick my ass more than me. So if I am feeling anger or sadness, particularly sadness, I try not to beat myself up for feeling that way, because I used to do that too. It's like, oh, I'm sad. Why are you sad? You have a job. You're not, in Afghanistan getting shot at. Yeah. You have a home. You have a roof on your head. You asshole. Why are you upset? Why are you down? What's wrong with you? And I would berate myself. And now it's a process. It's an ongoing process. Now I'm trying to say, okay, you're sad today. It's okay, man. You're a human being. You're allowed to be sad every now and then. And try and sit in it and let it pass through me. Let it pass through me, because
Randy, I was going to ask specifically about that, because even in the book, I mean, you come out with just your innate feelings, and there's statements in the book where you're like, Randy, you idiot, do this. And I wanted to ask where that has brought you today in regards to yourself. Call it self-compassion, call it giving yourself a break. Because again, man, I resonate. I felt like it was my job to kick my own ass.
Yes.
And until a therapist said, as I was explaining it to him, he said, he kind of go along going, so if this happened and it was a friend, how would you react? If they did this, how would you react? But with you, and what he ultimately said is, so what you're saying is you think you're better than everybody else. Everybody else gets grace but you, Kevin, because you're perfection. You're like super. Man, that rocked me back, one. And two, just the realization that kicking my own ass wasn't helping anything.
No.
So when you talk about berating yourself and whatnot, how does that look today? Is it just an awareness and a stop, or how do you address it?
It's me trying to catch it. It really is, and being like, dude, this is ridiculous. You're beating up on yourself for being a human being. Stop. And sometimes I can catch it. And I also think, and this is tricky, because then I'll also start kicking my own again for this. If I catch myself, and I'm a great catastrophizer, I screw up something minuscule and it ends in global thermonuclear warfare. I can draw a logical sequence of events very quickly, where me forgetting to pick up some yogurt for my girlfriend ends with the sky being on fire. And I realize, though, when I'm doing this stuff, yes, I'm thinking all this entirely negative stuff. But at its root, what am I thinking about? Me. And it's just the flip side of the narcissism coin. It's just the other side of egomania, when I'm still just thinking about myself. And if I am so busy, and this is one thing I learned in sobriety, because some people helped me when I was in my early sobriety. They came to me. I knew guys who were sober. I was on tour, and they were like, I'm like, please help me. I don't know what to do. And they're like, okay, dude, calm down. Right? They were able to help me. And they told me, one day maybe you'll be able to help someone. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like I could help anyone at the time. They're like, get through this. You'll be able to help someone. Trust me. So when I get catching myself kicking my like that, I'm catching myself slipping into this self-centered, like I said, I view it as just the inverse of this egomania coin. It's a form of narcissism. I think, how can you effectively be of service to anyone if you're busy kicking your own ass?
Fair. Yeah.
And for me, the older that I get, I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa. I'm not a saint. I don't walk around with open arms like, let me help you. But yeah, I need to try and think about someone or some things other than myself in order to find true fulfillment in my life. Because my life is actually pretty decent. I have a good job. I have a romantic partner. I have a house over my head, and it's an interesting life. So the basics are taken care of. I'm not struggling to survive. From there, what am I supposed to do? Just collect money and buy designer crap or whatever? What kind of life is that? I need to attempt to help people. And I have found that I feel better if I help people. It helps me a lot. It really does.
Well, and I appreciate your stories. Gosh, the story was it chapter 2 about Wayne, the guy who
Yeah, the first chapter. Yeah.
ultimately died. I want to ask, I'm going to call it, I started off calling it intellectually sober, and I'm going to correct myself, sobering. That's our journey. We're
right.
continually working on the sobering. So I really I'm going to read something out of your book.
Awesome.
And you said, you thought you were a pretty smart kid, and you recognized, as you just talked about, these hypocrisies that you saw was really difficult. But you said, here's what you said, but you were still a kid, and that realizing your viewpoints at that time were based upon yourself and your own beliefs at that time. They were unexamined, self-righteous, reactionary beliefs that are inherently shallow. Now, no matter how cool they look in a spiked leather jacket or today in an internet meme. Okay, then you go on, and this is where you really got me. If something is worth believing in, political position, religion, humanitarian efforts, whatever, if it's worth believing in, surely it should withstand rigorous examination from a rational, educated observer with, critical thinking skills. That's sobering. That was a hell yes, from me to I hope my former self,
right,
who had these perspectives, and I believed them. And were they rigorously examined? Did you reminded me of what we've been talking about a lot here on the show with some other folks too, of whatever side I take, have I taken the time to, the proverbial stepping the other person's shoes,
right,
and understand it from their side, make a case for their side? Because what I'll probably realize is we're not that far off.
No. I think at a root, everyone wants the same thing. And I think that's a real problem in our society today, with the disconnect created. Obviously, neither you and I are Luddites. We're not afraid of using computers because we're using one for this interview right now. But I think this communication technology, these screens have given us the illusion of connection, right? This illusion of having a true community with people that most of them you never meet. And it becomes easier and easier and easier for you to confirm your cognitive biases, to find things that you already feel are correct. And then you find other people willing to prop that up. Yeah. And particularly within given the context of social media, like say Twitter or Instagram, there's not enough room in those little comment sections for you to express a complex thought, to elucidate on the complexities of how you feel about something and why you believe this. It just becomes an A or B thing. And it's really quite divisive, I think. And it drives people into these sort of tribalized virtual groups. And I think the only way that people, at least for me, I think any sort of positive change now is impossible on a group level, on a massive group level. I think it has to come from individual interactions, because I can get along with pretty much anyone face to face. If we meet, I can find common ground with someone. I mean, unless they're just this utterly morally reprehensible person. I
Could you,
can,
Randy? I got a question
yeah.
just on that with the social media, and you're ultimately talking about bias, yeah, and our propensity. I'm blown away. I had a professor on at some point who just this isn't rocket science. I was ignorant, and he was talking about the news, and that if you look up, or whoever with their views looks up the same search term and
Oh yeah.
comes up with the same news title on CNN or Fox, they get this, and I'm going to get a different headline. I didn't know,
Oh,
and it
dude,
just
I
I
do it
thought,
daily. That's one of my exercises. I am a news addict. It sucks, and it's really been driving me crazy lately. But I do look. I'll look at CNN. I'll look at Fox. I'll look at Al Jazeera. I'll look at the BBC to see what they feel. And then I'll go to like Reuters because they're a little bit. They're not totally without bias, but there's a website called All Sides, and it's supposedly it shows the same story. Let's say it's a story about a dog in Boise, Idaho, and it'll show the different headlines. One will be from a leftist perspective, left-leaning news outlet perspective, one from more right, and one from as centrist as you can get, and it's incredible. Even not even just the same terms, the news like for the same story. If you look it up, if you look at CNN, the first thing that flashes up will be different than what shows up on Fox News. 100%. They will place importance on one story far above another. It's completely different.
It's nuts. Oh, well, and I wondered with you and how we tend to get that confirmation bias. We can't get away from it. Did you have some of that fed your own perspectives from your audience? I mean, you got a lot of power there. If you're on stage or on your own social media, I mean, you got a lot of people following you that would tend to align with you. Did that feed some of the perspective that you're now saying, yeah, it wasn't rigorously examined?
I think it's very dangerous to when you reach a certain level of quote unquote fame or notoriety. I think it's very dangerous to pay attention to what people who love your music say about you, because they tend to prop you up, and you will start believing your own crap.
That's what I was asking about.
Yeah, I have tried. We in the business, because I'm the lead singer, we call it LSD, lead singer's disease, right? I have mine pretty firmly in check. We are normal dudes. We live in Richmond, Virginia. We didn't move to Hollywood or New York, and none of us drive like Lamborghinis. I think there's been a very conscious effort on I know there has on my part and on the dudes in my band to remain grounded, because it's just really, I don't know, it's dangerous. And when you start believing your own hype and your own crap, that's when your talent tends to abandon you. You're not being real anymore. So
it's a Scarface, getting high in your own supply.
100%. And I've always tried as much as possible to reduce, to kind of dismiss that rock star illusion, because it never interested me. I never thought I'd be a professional musician. I just wanted to play some music, and it just organically happened.
I want to ask about, well, a couple things on fear that you speak to. One of them, my personal focus right now is on identity, how we view our own identity, and when it is, for lack of better terms, when it's weak, that everything threatens it. Everything can threaten it.
Right.
Okay, so there's my preface to, this is a quote. This is actually out of I think the intro in the book. And you said, if you are unwilling to question your own beliefs and accept and you accept them just at face value for yourself, you are driven by fear. Unpack that a little bit, and then I'm going to dig into some more of what you spoke to in regards to fear in the book.
All right. Well, fear, I was driven by fear for years when drinking. It was very fear-based behavior.
Of what? Are you clear on what the fear exactly was?
It's interesting. There are lots of different fears. There's still the nebulous fear in my life that they are going to find out. They are going to find out, and they are going to let everybody know that I'm a no-talent hack, that I don't belong in a band, that I shouldn't have a publisher of a book, that I shouldn't be allowed to exhibit photographs, and that people should know exactly the just worthless piece of crap I am. They are going to find out, and they are going to let everybody know, and then it's all going to be taken away, and my family will be disgraced. And who are they? I don't know. It's the nebulous cloud of doom that has hung over me. I think with its regards to specific fears for me, I was so driven. I as I said, at a young age, I tried to fin it. It didn't work. And then I started drinking, and it made me feel more comfortable in my own skin. It really did. And it worked that way for a long time. And I think the fear of me going back to feeling completely uncomfortable in my own skin may have been a driving component behind continuing to drink. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Well, it speaks to identity. Yeah. To being, as I look at and continue to research identity.
You bring that up. That's another thing. Okay. For me, my identity, particularly being involved in the punk rock scene, as I talked about, there's definitely there's a political component of it. There's speaking out against injustice. My identity basically became one big middle finger to the world for a long time. And it was, I'm angry at injustice. I'm angry at these greedy bazillionaire who have enough money to solve world hunger, but they aren't doing anything because they're greedy. I'm angry at corruption. I'm angry at people who would take over other countries for imperialistic purposes. I'm angry, and that becomes, and I'm justified in that anger, right? I am completely justified in that anger because all that sucks. And get more and more angry in that, and that becomes my identity, and that becomes my protective shell. When it's this anger, this being a middle finger to the world, I built that up to protect this hurt kid, to protect this hurt kid, and perhaps that was necessary. But after a while, when your identity is that of an angry person, it's not sustainable, I don't think. Not if you want to have any sort of modicum of inner peace at all. And that anger, if you sit in it and you wear it as a shell for so long, you become ineffective. It's impotent anger. Great, you're angry about all this stuff. What are you doing about it?
So with that, you even said you felt completely justified in your anger. That word, justified, has gotten to be it's a dirty word to me. I'm tired of justifying everything. Some things I don't know. I just don't know. And even the things that I may make a decision on and go forward on, I'm going to do it, and maybe I'll call it faith, but do I have it justified? I'm really tired of I've worn myself out trying to justify things. So when you say that you were, at the time you felt completely justified in your anger, how's that look now?
I mean, I think as far as, like we were talking earlier, as far as big ticket universal morality stuff, there is good and bad. And I think if I were to see someone, I'm walking down the street and I see someone come up and assault an elderly woman and try and steal her purse, that's going to make me angry. And hopefully I'm going to step in and try and stop this situation. And that's justifiable. But once you look at something that has angered you and you ask yourself, well, why, if you have to ask yourself, why am I mad about this? And you continue to sit in that anger, and you can continue to feel justified in remaining angry. It's self-centered behavior because you're not doing anything other than just being pissed off, I think. And that for me is not enough. It's not enough. And you know, I am known as a malcontent at time and have gotten involved in some things, you know, where there were things that I saw as injustices and I took steps. But if I'm not going to do anything about something that makes me mad, just sitting in it is, and being mad about it and going on social media and posting this, that's just masturbation. You know, that's all it is.
Well, and you talk about, I was going to ask on this topic of fear, because it's a main focal point of your chapter 2. And you talk about fear, and I appreciate your segmenting it in some sense. You talk about primal fear and the fear of, you know, if there's an alligator coming after you, you do well to have.
You better be fair. You better be afraid.
Fear and get out of there. But as you talked in there, and again, it's been a focus of mine, overlapping on some of the shows, of so much of our fear, we're not in physical danger.
No,
we're not really in psychological danger. I mean, unless you've got somebody who's, you know, overpowering you, maybe, but for the most of us, we don't. Where is that? Questioning the fear. Like, I'm back to identity. Why do I feel so threatened? It makes no sense.
Well, I think it's, you know, I think science tells us that it's a hangover. It's a physiological hangover from the time when our fight or flight and freeze reactions were critical to our survival. As you're saying, you're mentioning the crocodile. You know, I think I read about it. He's coming towards you in the river. You better move, or you're gonna get chomped. When we basically have the same cerebral structure as early man, it's increased in size slightly, but not that much. The pathways are still there. So these physiological and neurological reactions we have to threats, these automatic and self-defensive reactions, they're meant for primitive man living where saber-toothed tigers might be about to eat you. You remove all that, and let's face it, although there are people in war zones right now, most human beings are not in a struggle for life and death, you know? But I think this perception of danger, this perception of threat coming from all these screens and everything is causing that primal reaction, that misplaced reaction to kick in, and it results in anxiety, really, you know, which is, I think anxiety is sort of modern emotion, really. I don't think cavemen were anxious. They were either afraid or they were okay.
Agreed. And yet we act like that in our anxiety, like we are about to get eaten by a crocodile.
Yeah.
You know, looking at anger, the war inside your head, as you talk about, it would be easy to come over here and say, okay, so the effort then is to come out from that and just be happy. I want to ask you about that. You know that happy is a big focal point. I mean, if you got a book, you know, put happy on it, or a podcast, put happy on it, and it gets a lot. And I'm going to ask you your perspective on that, because I'm guessing that you may not have the same view or pursuit of happy as the norm either. Tell me about it.
Happiness is transitory. It is not possible to remain perpetually happy. When I first got sober, for the first month of sobriety, I was on tour with my band, and I was experiencing what we call the pink cloud, where everything is overwhelmingly glorious. And I was annoyingly happy. I was like, this is great. I'm sober. Everybody, I'm sober. Isn't that awesome? Running around like a maniac. And some of my guys were like, oh, I think I liked you better when you were pissed off and angry. At least you were to yourself, That level of quote unquote happiness is not sustainable. It's a transitory state. So that leveled out eventually because real life kicked back in, and I had to deal with reality as it was. So my father is regarding happiness. This is a very smart man. He told me something when I was younger, because at times he'd be a bit grim and severe to my mind, my young mind. And I'm like, don't you want to be happy? Why aren't you happy? And he goes, I think I would rather be content than happy. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And I didn't understand that. I was like, but happiness is this thing you should strive for. You should strive to be happy, 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 happy. And you can't be happy all the time. You just can't. As I said, it's a transitory emotional state. Joy is a transitory emotional state. If you walked around full of joy all the time, someone would eventually give you some medication or lock you up in a straitjacket. But contentment is something we can aspire to. I think it's a bit more middle ground. It does not require external validation to be contented. You can be content with what you have, where you are, no matter what the situation is. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I mean, as strange as it seems, in my first book, I wrote a book called Dark Days about some legal issues I had. And I went to prison in the Czech Republic for a little bit. And for a while, I found some contentment and serenity in prison. I mean, it was not cool. I don't recommend it as a way to level out your emotions a little bit. But I was like, okay, I'm in here. I'm okay. At least I'm not, in Afghanistan or something, and people aren't shooting at me. I'm not being bombed or anything. And I learned to maintain a sort of level and sort of emotional keel. But yeah, man, happiness, I think perpetual happiness just isn't possible. And just from my cantankerous disposition, I think it'd be annoying.
I was going to say, I don't even know if I want it.
No, God.
Happy moments, sure. I mean, I love those, with the kids, and it's a, pizza night or whatever. I mean, it's fun, but man, the daily curiosity about life and the feelings and the emotions, I don't even equate with happiness. I appreciate, contentment from you. We mentioned a minute ago, the part of you that you called Mr. Relentless Optimism.
Right.
And then also the dark one.
Right.
How do you view that as a daily conflict or war, or is it just aspects of your identity that both have a purpose?
I think they both serve a purpose. I think they both have valid views at times, but I think they're so far in the extreme on either end that their sort of viewpoints are too clouded to hold any real validity. Because I'm writing about in the book these two sort of sides of me in the chapter My War, which is named after a Black Flag song. The dark sort of nihilistic guy inside of me, which certainly exists, he sees some things that are definitely negative in the world, but he only sees those things. and just writhes in this horrible anger. And then on the other side of that, there's this guy who just, everything's going to be okay, and constantly trying to prop everybody up and prop himself up, and it's going to be okay, you know? But that guy is ignoring the problems in the world. And so for me, it's kind of a matter of trying to meet in the middle and sort of actually look at those two viewpoints as outside of myself, almost as external characters almost within me. Because they apply these judgments of these value judgments of good and bad on everything, you know? And I think if you're going with the Mr. Relentless Optimism guy, he's trying to force happiness onto everything, and some things just aren't happy. But if I'm negative, I'm trying to just force this doom and gloom onto all situations, and that's just not true. If you can look at the worst situations that are happening anywhere in the world, like bombs are dropping, and that's currently happening somewhere, you know, bombs are dropping, but at the same time, there is a child being born, and a mother is seeing her child for the first time, and she is feeling, this is her first kid, she's feeling magic, you know? No matter what's going on outside of her, she's feeling that magic joy of life, that component of, I'm a mother for the first time. This is my child. I love it more than anything on earth. Even though I'm in a war zone, life is still being created, and she's feeling that. So it's not A or B, it's both, you know?
Let me then ask you, I mean, I'm looking at your book, and the tagline, making peace with the wars inside of our head. I mean, even that statement, that tagline is recognizing that we generally do, that we have wars inside our head.
Yeah.
Would you say that you have found I don't want to say made peace with them, but have found the ability to be at peace amongst it?
I think recognizing the fact that there is a bit of war in my head, that there is this internal conflict that I need to take a look at and not get so caught up of it. Just the simple fact that I'm recognizing that helps me to make peace with it, I think, rather than, you know, remaining unexamined. And I certainly have not attained some bodhisattva status. I'm not sitting here zenned out all the time, perfectly at peace with everything. But I'm trying every day. I'm trying to become the most effective me I can. And if I'm caught in the middle of this just gnarly, constant, internal conflict all the time, I'm not a very effective person. I'm ineffective. I can't change anything for the better.
How has it affected the trajectory of your art?
What?
Well, just the journey, because I would expect it to be in anger, in alcoholism.
Right.
It's going to come out a certain way. And
yes.
In your examined life now, it would seem that it would bear a different fruit. Maybe.
Right. Well, it depends on what aspect of the art. And this is something, I'll be honest, that I do struggle with. Writing music in my band, writing lyrics. We're a heavy metal band, but we don't sing about wizards or dragons or anything. Like I said, I come from the punk rock scene. There's much more of a socio-political tone to it. The music is angry and it's aggressive, most of it. And I can't write a love song to Lamb of God music. I just can't do it. It doesn't fit. So I generally write about things in the world that distress me. And emotionally, it's taxing on me to write that stuff. It really does. And I have to remember when I sit down to write songs, not to live in them too much, to step into that, to express what needs to be expressed and step back out. Conversely, with prose writing, I think there's a lot more room for nuance, and I can play with ideas and try and come to a not quite so, I don't know, not maybe reactionary is the wrong word for our songs, but not so much, I don't know, commentary on everything constantly. I'm trying to look at myself and learn about myself within that, rather than write about external things. And I'm a photographer as well. With that, it's different. I'm looking for beauty. I am looking for beauty. I do not create beauty. I'm more of a street photographer. But I try and find beauty even in the mundane with photography as well. So there's sort of three different approaches to art. They really are. I think sobriety and has enabled me to be the writer that I'm supposed to be. Because before I just drank and talked about being a writer. I didn't write a book until I got sober, but I read Hemingway and Bukowski and Hunter S. Thompson and all those guys who drank and fought and womanized, and I did all that stuff. I was practicing what those great writers did, with the main exception of doing one critical component, that being the writing.
Fair.
You know?
I found the book, Randy. I could probably talk to you for 2 hours or more, but I won't. I found it. You talked about it. Yeah, is it reactionary? I found it very responsive, very diplomatic, if I can say, to some degree. I mean, you expressed your opinions, but with grace, I felt like, and just a lot of introspection. I just found myself with a lot of resonance and respect, honestly, as I read.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. It's interesting. I'm glad you said you saw introspection. Did it make you ask any questions of yourself?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's because I did not want to write a book that says I have the answers to this. I just want to write a book that's like, I am questioning myself. I'm searching. And my main hope for the book is that the reader might sit there and ask some questions of themselves.
I would say on that I felt like you were honest with your opinions, and that, XYZ pisses you off and you're not a fan of that. But not but. And humility in recognizing your own anger, your own, I'm going to paraphrase, your own myopicness.
Yes.
Though I also saw, you talk about those people that you've read, and I felt like this is a very, very well-educated guy, which is why I wanted to talk. I think I could talk to you a lot about a lot of issues and aspects that, because I felt a resonance. So, man, I'm grateful that I came across the book. I'm grateful that your agent got a hold of me.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's sparked, it's, I think, opened up some new thoughts. And yeah, as I read your journey and your own, I'll call it, introspection and willingness to question yourself, willing to, again, to some degree, I'm going to call it a humility to go, okay, I'm pissed, but it's just me. And I'm going to, let's get rigorous and let's look at this and let's look at the other side. Let's consider that I'm just me and I'm coming to it from my aspect, and there are other perspectives. It helped it take root more so because it wasn't just a pissed off spouting off.
I'm glad it didn't come off that way. Nobody likes to be around the angry guy all the time. I
wouldn't have had you on the show. I did my vetting and my research. So, man, I've been playing with the book, reading the book. the last part I read was you talking about hoping you didn't get annihilated by your dad when you're doing wood as a kid and get hit in the head. Because we just did wood today. I chopped some wood. We passed it in through the window and did around, and we've got holes in the side of the house when the kids, have thrown it, and I'm
chucking
don't
it.
Kill somebody with it. So again, just a lot of resonance with your history and with your journey. So your journey speaks to me a lot because it is a journey I have been on, and some of the aspects they're fresh. I'm really looking at it. So I'll probably find myself coming back to you with your thoughts on some other aspects of it, because I like your frame of reference a lot, Randy.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. I'm excited to share it with our audience and let them learn from your journey.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. It's been a good talk, man.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Can't wait to hook up with Randy in a couple weeks in Denver for his spoken word tour. He put me on the VIP list. I'm really honored and just looking forward to getting to know him better. Again, the book is called Just Beyond the Light. You can find Randy, type in Randy Blythe, Blythe. You'll find him everywhere. And of course, his band, Lamb of God. Got a comment or question for myself or for Randy? We've been trading emails since we had that conversation. I'll get the question to him as well. Find me at kevinmeller.co. Till next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy your ride.
Yeah.